Sterling initially soars after Boris Johnson secures a Brexit deal with the European Union. So a deal has been struck in the 11th hour, but there are still doubts about it being approved by UK lawmakers. Is this necessarily a done deal? I don't think it's ever necessarily a done deal when we're talking about Brexit. There's been so many curveballs already throughout this entire process. The one thing that we can be convinced about is that there may be another surprise or two along the way. The difficulty that we have now is that because of the Ben bill, which forces the Prime Minister to request an extension if an agreement hasn't been struck with the EU and approved by lawmakers, but also combined with the comments that we had from Jean-Claude Juncker earlier on, who suggested that the EU will not be offering an extension, almost counteracting that bill itself, is that lawmakers are left with a very difficult situation whereby they either have to approve this deal or accept no deal or hope that the EU will change its mind over the next couple of weeks if they don't approve the deal. I think what's most notable here is that there's still a number of different scenarios that can play out, and that's what's going to make this so interesting, because the markets are closed on the weekend, which means the pound could open in many different places on Monday morning, and that makes things a lot more interesting, a lot more volatile and a lot more uncertain. Sterling almost hit 130 against the dollar after the announcement, having traded around 122 only a week ago. Why has it since fallen back to trade lower on the day? Well, I think there was a couple of factors which really contributed to the drop-off in the pound, having hit almost 130 against the US dollar. The first is the old adage in the markets, buy the rumour, sell the fact. The pound has been rallying for the last week on anticipation that a deal could be struck. The mood has turned much more positive since Boris Johnson met with Leo Varadkar last week in the northwest of England, and since then optimism has only been building. So once the deal was announced, we saw the initial knee-jerk reaction higher, and since then I think we have seen some profit taking. This also coincided with the revelation that the DUP would not back the deal. Now, this could be the breaking point for the deal ahead of the vote on Saturday, because not only does that represent 10 crucial votes for Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party, but there's also a number of lawmakers who have previously said that they would not support any deal that didn't have the support of the DUP as well, and that almost ruins Boris' chances of getting this deal through Parliament. But again, there are plenty of surprises that could still arise during the vote on Sunday, and Jean-Claude Juncker's comments earlier on really were an additional curveball throughout this process. The vote in Parliament will take place on Saturday when the markets are closed. What can we expect when they open next week? Well, this is the difficulty, because there are a number of different scenarios which could come on Saturday, and there's a number of more which we're not really necessarily aware of yet. The most obvious one is that this deal is passed through Parliament and the UK is leaving the EU on the 31st of October. This could cause a nice lift in the pound. How far it goes is debatable. A number of people in the market suggesting that 130 to 135, maybe even pushing 140, is not unreasonable. And when you consider how much sterling has fallen over the last few years, the idea that we could now be seeing a smooth Brexit is certainly appealing and certainly a supportive factor for the pound. You counter that with the idea that a deal is not passed in Parliament on Saturday, and that moves us closer towards no deal, and you can understand why you could potentially anticipate a much sharper movement in the other direction. Then it all comes down to the EU over the next 24 hours or so. If they refuse to block no deal Brexit, if they refuse to back what Jean-Claude Juncker said earlier this afternoon and suggest that they would be open to offering an extension, then that gives lawmakers an incentivisation to reject his deal, knowing they'll get the extension, knowing they'll get an election, and knowing that there could potentially be another referendum. So while that could lead to a slight drop-off in the pound in the immediate aftermath of the vote and the session in Parliament on Saturday, there is still potential for room for some upside in sterling over the next couple of months, depending on how the following process would go. If you enjoy these videos, don't forget to like, subscribe, and of course, turn on alerts, and leave any feedback in the comments box below.